There are easier ways to get a sky tour of an area. Hanging on to the tail of the world's most interesting facts, it's time for Cool, Weird, Awesome. I'm Brady. It's Monday, February 10th, this week in 1945. A fascinating fact for anyone who didn't have to live it firsthand. A wartime airplane mechanic accidentally ended up airborne on the tail of a plane. She was Margaret Horton, leading aircraft woman at a Royal Air Force base in North Lincolnshire, England. She was a mechanic there with the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, and at the time of this very strange workday, she was helping with what was called a rough weather procedure. They didn't want planes to tip or sway ahead of takeoff, so they would have humans climb aboard to serve as ballast as the planes taxied. Horton was on the tail of a Spitfire. Typically, she and the pilot would exchange some kind of signals so she could hop off the plane just before it started getting into the air. But for whatever reason, those signals never happened. The pilot started the regular takeoff procedure instead of the one for rough weather. Before Horton could get his attention, the plane and Horton were in the air. At this point, she figured she was a goner. She was barely holding onto the tail as it was, so she could really only think of what a shame it was that she didn't get to say goodbye to her mother. She waited for the inevitable to come, but it didn't. For one thing, she happened to be in a position where parts of the aircraft were physically in the way of her slipping off. She never even lost her beret while she was in the air. And while she didn't know it at the time, the pilot had radioed back to base to say he wanted to land because there was something wrong with the tail controls. The ground staff realized, to their horror, that the something wrong was Margaret Horton hanging onto the tail. They didn't want to freak the pilot out, so they just said, "Okay, we'll see you back on the ground," without telling him who was on the tail. The plane made what Horton called a perfect, gentle landing. She had somehow hung onto the plane's tail in flight and lived to tell the tale. Horton later wrote that British pilots had a saying about their planes during the war: "A Spitfire will never let you down," and she was living proof of that. You can learn more about Margaret Horton and her unexpected flight at coolweirdawesome.com. And we'll have another story of something placed on an implement of flight for you. That's right after this short break. Welcome back. Today is National Umbrella Day. I mean, Mary Poppins used them to fly, right? Portland, Maine is home to the Umbrella Cover Museum. Founder Nancy 3 Hoffman had kept the covers for all the umbrellas she'd ever owned and decided, I guess I have the start of a museum collection here. I'm Brady, as one does. Thanks for listening, and come back again tomorrow for more Cool, Weird, Awesome.
Another helpful Brady Carlson project.